jungle didn't whisper. It screamed. Mosquitoes buzzed like static in his ears. Leaves crackled under boots that weren't his. His uniform half soaked in sweat, half in fear clung to his skin like punishment. 19-year-old Amir Khan had dreamed of this day since he was 10. Not the jungle, not the mission, but the moment someone finally handed him a real blade and said, "You're ready." He wasn't. Not really. He had been a skinny kid from Punjab, always running from bullies, always hiding in alleyways. But when he saw that army commando video on his cousin's phone, a man leaping from a chopper, bullets flying past him like angry bees, he made a promise. I'll be that. I'll be brave. Training was brutal, yes, but he survived it. He earned the badge. His mother cried the day he left. His father just placed a hand on his shoulder, the kind of touch that says, "I don't know how to say I'm proud, so I'll do this instead." But nothing prepared Amir for Operation Black Wind. It was supposed to be simple: track a militant supply line deep in the forest, mark coordinates, and leave. No engagement, no fire, no contact. But contact found them anyway. And now Amir was alone. His squad was scattered. Radios dead. One man screamed before falling silent. Another had shouted Amir's name before vanishing behind a burst of gunfire. Amir didn't know if he was alive or just gone. He was crawling now, his hands and knees sinking into the wet moss like the earth itself was trying to pull him down. His rifle was heavy. His lungs were heavier. He found a stream. It shimmered like glass under the moonlight, mocking him with its stillness. He dropped his gear, rolled onto his back, and stared up at the canopy of stars peeking through the leaves. And then he cried. Not loud, not sobbing, just tears sliding into the water beside his face, mixing with the mud. He tried to stop them. Commandos didn't cry, right? But the truth clawed its way up his throat. I wanted to be a commando. Now I'm crying in the water. He whispered it like a confession, like a prayer, because somewhere in the distance the enemy was still hunting, and he wasn't sure he wanted to run anymore. The sun rose reluctantly that morning, casting pale orange streaks over the jungle canopy, as if hesitant to witness what the next hours would bring. Rayon trudged through the ankle-deep mud, his uniform soaked, his boots squelching with every step. The tropical rain had stopped, but its aftermath clung to every leaf and every breath. The only sound was the low hum of mosquitoes, and the occasional rustle of movement deeper in the undergrowth, a reminder that they were not alone. He had made it through the first week of the brutal Special Forces selection course, but his body bore the price. Blisters lined his feet, his thighs were raw from friction, and his hands, once steady and clean, now trembled under the weight of exhaustion. Yet what hurt more than any bruise was the slow erosion of the dream he'd clung to since boyhood. Becoming a commando wasn't just a career. It was the fulfillment of his late father's legacy. His father, Major Tariq, had died on a mission in the Northern Highlands. His body never recovered. All Rayan had were stories, medals, and the uniform that still hung in his mother's wooden closet, pressed, preserved, but untouched. Every time he put on his own fatigues, he tried to fill the gap between who he was and who his father had been. But here, in the unforgiving arms of the jungle, that gap felt like a chasm. They were given just 1 hour of sleep the previous night, if you could even call it that. Rain had poured relentlessly, soaking their hammocks and chilling them to the bone now, as the instructors barked orders, pushing them into the river for another timed endurance swim. Rayan's body screamed in protest, his vision blurred. His limbs, once driven by conviction, now moved only by muscle memory. He dived into the icy current, the shock of the cold stealing his breath. Around him, the other candidates swam with gritted teeth, their faces twisted in grimaces of pain and focus. Rayan fought to stay afloat, his breath short, heart pounding. The river was not wide, but under fatigue, everything stretched like eternity. And then it happened. Halfway through, his muscles locked. His arms stopped responding. Panic set in. His head dipped below the surface, water rushing into his nose. He kicked violently, desperate for air, but his energy was spent. The world went silent. Underwater, time slowed, just like in the dreams he used to have as a child where he couldn't scream or run. In that moment of near drowning, something deeper than pain surfaced. Regret. Not regret for joining, no, but for thinking he had to do it alone. His pride had kept him distant from his team. He had believed he had to earn this alone, to suffer in silence. That's what commandos did, right? Bear pain, break silently, become shadows. But now, sinking into the river, a single tear mixed with the muddy current, not of weakness, but of realization. Suddenly, a strong grip seized his collar and yanked him upward. It was Murad, a fellow recruit from Karachi, the loud one with a crooked smile and a defiant laugh that always irritated Rayan. But in that instant, Murad was a lifeline. With powerful strokes, he pulled Rayan to the riverbank, dragging his half-conscious body onto the grass. "You idiot," Murad spat, breathless. "You think you're proving something by dying out there?" Rayan coughed violently, spewing water, clutching at the earth beneath him. He blinked, gasping. "I didn't ask for help." "No," Murad said coldly. "But maybe it's time." "You started." The instructors approached, and instead of yelling or disqualifying him, one of them simply knelt beside Rayan, looking at him with unreadable eyes. "You broke?" the man asked. Rayan didn't answer immediately. He stared at the sky, the clouds moving gently now, as if mocking his struggle. No, he rasped finally, but I bent, bad. The instructor nodded slowly. It's not the pain that decides who makes it, it's what you do after the pain. Those words etched themselves into Rayan's mind like fire across wet canvas. That night, around a small fire built from damp twigs, Rayan sat with the other recruits. For the first time, no longer a shadow at the edge of the group, he listened to their jokes, their complaints, their fears. Murad handed him a metal cup of lukewarm tea and muttered, "Commando doesn't mean ghost, bro, it means brotherhood." Rayan held the cup tightly. For the first time, the dream didn't feel like a towering mountain. It felt like a path, hard, yes, but walkable. If he didn't walk it alone, he still wanted to be a commando. But now, he understood. Even the strongest warriors cry in the water. Especially the ones who survive. The water had its own voice, sometimes a whisper, sometimes a scream. For Ayan, this night, it sang the soft hymn of sorrow. The moon cast a broken path across the lake, its silver trail trembling with every ripple. He stood waist-deep in the freezing water, his uniform soaked, heart heavier than ever. Behind him, the jungle was alive with the sounds of war, but he had long stopped hearing it. In his ears, only one sentence echoed, again and again. You were supposed to save him. Ayan had trained for years, sleepless nights, blistered feet, bones that had healed crooked. He endured it all for one badge, the commando insignia. He thought becoming one would mean he could protect everyone. But here he was, drenched, alone, crying into the same water where his best friend had died minutes ago. A grenade, a misstep, a second too late, and everything changed. He clenched his jaw, but his lips still trembled. Not from the cold that had numbed away hours ago, but from shame. He had pulled Faison into this mission, promised him glory, survival, brotherhood. And when it counted, he had been fast, just not fast enough. Faison's body had been torn apart before Ayan could even scream his name. Wasn't that what being a commando meant? That your brothers didn't die on your watch? He remembered the first time they swam across this very lake during training. It had been brutal. The instructor, a tall scar-faced beast of a man, barked from the shore. You either swim, or you drown trying. Faison had almost drowned that day, and it was Ayan who'd dragged him to the other side. Laughing, coughing, choking, but alive. You're not a hero yet, Faison had said, gasping. But you're my damn hero, Bruno. And in this exact same lake, Ayan was alone. The hero title meant nothing. He took another step deeper. The water reached his chest. His rifle floated beside him, useless, heavy with guilt. He let it go. He felt like he was dissolving. Was this what war did to you? Was this the weight no one prepared you for? Suddenly a branch snapped behind him. He turned, almost too slowly. A young soldier, barely out of his teens, stumbled into view. Blood soaked the boy's shoulder, but he stood tall. Sir, he whispered, trembling. They're coming. We have to move now. Ayan didn't speak. He just stared. This boy had seen Faison die too, and yet, he came back for him. The ghost of command stirred within Ayan's chest. Barely. He didn't want to move. He didn't want to fight. But when he looked at the kid's eyes, desperate, trusting something ancient woke up inside him, he had to be more than grief. Faison would have wanted that. Minutes later, the two of them were crawling through reeds, the enemy's flashlight beams sweeping the lake's edge. Gunfire cracked in the distance. The jungle was turning into a graveyard. Ayan led the way, each movement slow, precise. His tears had dried, but a trail remained. Inside he was still broken, but now, he had a purpose. The young soldier behind him clung to his every command. And with every whisper, every hand signal, Ayan began to remember who he was. Not a failed commando. Not just a man who cried in the water, but someone who still had brothers to protect. Hours passed like years. They reached a hidden ridge overlooking a clearing where the rest of their unit had regrouped. A wounded captain saluted as Ayan emerged from the brush. We thought we lost you, the captain said. Ayan didn't respond. He just stared at it. The soldiers huddled around, bloody, tired, scared, and waiting for orders. The captain looked at the boy beside him. This one says you saved his life. Ayan's voice cracked for the first time in hours. I didn't save anyone, he said softly. I just didn't let him die. Then he turned to the unit, straightened his back and said, we hold here until dawn, then we move. He saw it in their eyes, the same thing he had once felt for his own heroes. Trust. That night, Ayan sat by the fire, staring at his boots. Faison's name echoed again, but this time not like a wound, like a promise. He pulled a small, blood-stained notebook from his chest pocket. It had belonged to Faison. Inside were sketches, scribbles, and one phrase underlined a dozen times. We're not heroes because we fight. We're heroes because we come back. Ayan didn't come back whole, but he came back. And maybe, that was enough for tonight. The base was quieter than usual that evening. The low hum of generators echoed across the training grounds, and the red haze of sunset turned the concrete walls into glowing embers. Irfan sat alone at the edge of the training pool, his boots beside him, his feet dangling in the cold water. No one said anything when he didn't show up for the tactical simulation that afternoon. No one came looking. And that, more than anything, told him everything he needed to know. He stared at his reflection, a face that looked older than the calendar claimed. Sunken eyes, bruised pride. The same water he once dove into during survival drills now shimmered with a bitter irony. It was in this water, months ago, that he had passed his first major endurance test. And it was here now, where the tears that slipped down his cheek merged, quietly with the ripples below, unseen and unsympathetic. I wanted to be a commando, he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. Now I'm crying in the water. No one would believe it. The boy who ran 3 kilometers with a weighted pack just to impress the instructor, the one who memorized every manual, every procedure, every emergency code, who volunteered for every extra shift, the one who saluted the mirror at night, imagining his name on a commendation letter. That boy had vanished, lost somewhere between humiliation and heartbreak. It wasn't just the physical torment, he could take that. It was the slow erosion of dignity. His superior, Captain Saeed, once praised his focus and obedience. But, the last few weeks, something had changed. Rumors, laughter behind his back. Mama's boy, they called him after someone found the letters from home in his locker, his mother's careful, loving handwriting, mocked by grown men. The worst was the incident 3 days ago, during a weapons disassembly timed test. Irfan's hands had trembled slightly, not from fear, but exhaustion. He hadn't slept properly in 4 nights, staying up to help a fellow trainee study. His mistake, fumbling the trigger housing, caused a delay of mere seconds. But in front of everyone, Instructor Zaman slammed the disassembled rifle onto the ground and barked, "You'll never lead anyone, Irfan. You'll get your unit killed." That line didn't just hurt, it planted a seed of doubt. Could it be true? Was he just not built for this? "I saw you running laps in the rain last week." The voice startled him. He turned sharply to see Amna, one of the only female trainees in the entire batch, standing a few feet behind him. She had a towel over her shoulder and wore track pants and a tank top, her hair damp from a run. Irfan wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed. "You saw that?" She walked closer, sat a few feet away from him at the pool's edge. "Yay, and I saw something else too." The instructor is watching from the gallery. "You think no one notices your effort, but trust me, some do." Erf looked down. "Effort means nothing if I keep failing in front of them." "No," she said firmly. "It means everything. You don't fail because you're weak, Irfan. You fail because they expect perfection, because they don't know how to teach someone who's already giving everything. So when you slip, even slightly, it's easier for them to mock than to understand." He listened quietly, unsure how to respond. No one had ever spoken to him like that in weeks, maybe months. Amna stood up and looked at the pool, then back at him. "You ever hear about the drowning test?" He shook his head. "They used to do it in an old elite unit," she said. "They'd push you into a deep tank, hands tied. You had to survive without help. Not to test your strength, but to see who panicked, who gave up, and who stayed calm and found a way to float. Most didn't pass. But the ones who did weren't the strongest. They were the ones who surrendered, not to fear, but to the water. They accepted it, and it carried them." She met his gaze. "You don't have to fight everything. Not all the time. Some pain you let pass through you, like water. That's how you survive here." Irfan looked at the pool again. The water shimmered faintly, reflecting the sky that now held stars. He took a deep breath, and for the first time in days, he didn't feel like drowning. Amna tossed him a towel. "Dry off. Training starts at 0500. If you want, we'll run together. No medals, just miles." He smiled faintly, a small, flickering thing, but real. "Thanks," he said. She shrugged. "You're not alone, Irfan. You never were. You just forgot for a while." As she walked away, he picked up the towel and wiped his face. The cold air stung less now. He stood, boots in hand, and looked once more at the water. It hadn't changed. But maybe he had. He wanted to be a commando. Maybe he still could be. But tonight, he was just a man standing at the edge of pain, learning how to float. The sun dipped low behind the ragged mountain range, casting long shadows across the jungle floor as Arman pressed forward. His soaked uniform clung to his skin like a second layer of shame, his boots squelching with every step. Around him, the forest pulsed with unseen life-tripping insects, the distant call of a bird, and the ever-present hum of danger. But it wasn't the wilderness that haunted him. It was the silence of his unit. The silence after the radio call. The silence when he realized they were gone. It had been 36 hours since the ambush, 36 hours since the laughing stopped, since the camaraderie dissolved into gunfire, screams, and choking smoke. Since he'd seen Salim, his closest friend, crawl out of the mud only to be pulled back in by a burst of machine gun fire. Arman had wanted to run to him, to help him, but instinct had screamed, otherwise. Survive. He hated that word now, hated what it had made him do. He reached a small clearing where a broken log offered the illusion of safety. He sat, pulled off his boot, and watched blood mix with the muddy water as he peeled away his sock. His foot was blistered, raw, torn, open by the endless march. He didn't care. He stared into the murky puddle at his feet. His reflection looked Baka, ghost of the boy who once dreamed of glory, of brotherhood, of valor. His hands trembled as he remembered the recruitment day, the proud moment when his mother kissed his forehead and said, "Go make your father proud." His father, the legendary Captain Faison, a name that still echoed in the training halls, a shadow Arman could never escape. "I wanted to be a commando," Arman whispered aloud, his voice cracked, dry and hoarse. "Now I'm crying in the water." He clenched his fists. What kind of soldier breaks down in the field? What kind of man survives while his brothers die? He wanted to scream, to punch the earth until his bones shattered, but all he did was cry. The tears flowed freely, silently, for the first time, not because he was scared, not because he was lost, but because he had failed. He remembered the instructor's voice during the survival drills. "You will break, everyone does. What matters is what you do after the break." Was this it? Was this his breaking point? The distant sound of rustling leaves yanked him back. Instinct returned. He wiped his tears, picked up his rifle, and slipped into a crouch. His eyes scanned the line. Something or someone was moving. Then he heard it moving. Then he heard it, whimpering. Not an animal, a human. He crept forward, weaving through the underbrush until he spotted the source, a young soldier, barely older than a cadet, slumped against a tree. His face was pale, his leg twisted unnaturally. Blood caked his pants. He was from Arman's unit, Talha. Arman whispered. The boy's eyes flickered open. "Sir?" Arman dropped beside him. "It's me. It's Arman." "Hold on," Talha tried to smile but winced in pain. "I thought I was the only one left." "You're not." "We're not finished yet," Arman said, trying to sound stronger than he felt. He worked quickly, his own sleeve to bind Talha's leg, giving him sips from his water bottle, whispering promises he didn't know if he could keep. But something had changed. Arman no longer felt alone. He no longer felt like the failure crying in the water. He had someone to protect. A mission again. As the night fell over the jungle and the darkness thickened, Arman dug a shallow foxhole beside Talha. He laid branches and leaves over them both, shielding them from the cold and predators alike. Above, the stars blinked through the canopy. Talha spoke softly. "I heard them on the radio. They think we're all dead. Then we'll surprise them," Arman replied, a faint fire lighting in his chest. There, under the jungle canopy, something stirred in him. It wasn't courage, not yet, but it was something close. The seed of it not long ago. He had thought the tears were the end. Now he realized they were the beginning of who he needed to become. The kind of soldier who fights not for glory or medals, but for the one man beside him, for the breath still in his lungs, for the promise that pain doesn't mean failure only, that the fight is still on. As Talha drifted into a pained sleep, Arman kept watch, his hand on the rifle, eyes scanning the dark. He didn't know what the morning would bring, but he knew one thing. He wasn't finished. Not yet. He floated in silence. The water around him had stilled, but inside him, chaos still churned. The mission had gone south. The team was scattered. Some were alive, others he couldn't let himself think about that yet. His breathing mask hissed quietly, a whisper against the pounding in his ears, adrift in the flooded ventilation tunnel. He stared upward toward the flickering emergency lights through murky water, alone, but not broken, not yet. He closed his eyes and tried to slow his pulse. "You're still alive, recruit," he muttered to himself. His voice echoed inside the mask, a thin thread of grounding in an unmoored world. This wasn't the first time he'd tasted despair, but it was the first time he couldn't see the edge of it. He had trained for ambushes, betrayal, blood, but not for guilt. Not for the weight of being the last one still breathing. A sudden clank echoed in the tunnel. His body reacted before his mind. Did he flipped around, knife drawn, weapon light off. Just movement. Debris. Maybe, but maybe not. The last transmission he'd heard was Corporal Lena screaming through static, then silence. He had yelled her name again and again, until the coms drowned in black silence. He could still hear her voice, there in the walls. He had known something was off about the compound. Too quiet, too intact. That wasn't victory. That was bait. Now the silence haunted him like a predator. His foot brushed against something soft, his stomach clenched. Slowly, he reached down and found a body. Not one of his host. Fighter, bare-chested, tattooed with ritual ink, throat slashed. The water had erased the blood, but not the story. The enemy was dying too. That meant someone had fought back. Maybe someone was still alive. He pressed on. The tunnel angled downward. He kicked off the wall, drifting weightless toward a metal grate. Beyond it, a glow, red, faint, a pulse, not just light heat, power. He pried the grate open with shaking hands, and slipped through the tunnel, opened into a service chamber type, rusting and in the corner, tucked behind panels and wires, was a boy. No older than 14, drenched, pale, clutching a rifle too big for his arms. They locked eyes. The boy didn't move. His finger twitched near the trigger. "It's okay." The commando, whispered voice filtered through the mask. "I'm not one of them." The boy didn't lower the rifle. "You're wearing the same gear." "I know, but I didn't shoot your family, I swear." A long silence passed. Then the boy blinked, and his arms fell. His face cracked not with rage, but grief. They took everyone, he whispered. The commando nodded. I know. I tried to hide with my brother. They caught him, he screamed. There were no words, only pain. The commando approached slowly. He kneeled and pulled off his mask. What's your name? Tyone. Tyone. I need your help. There's a tunnel behind you. Yes. The boy nodded. Does it lead to the main core? Yes. It's how they brought in the prisoners. He clenched his jaw. That meant his team had been taken, some of them. At least hope flickered again. Will you show me the way? The boy hesitated. They'll kill us. Maybe, but if we sit here, they win anyway. The boy stared at him a long time, then nodded. Together, they crawled through the tunnel. Tyon guided him past broken fans, cracked vents, and forgotten bloodstains. The enemy was close. Every breath had to be measured. Every footstep soft. At one turn, the boy stopped, held up a hand. They're above us. They crouched in stillness. Footsteps echoed. 2 guards. Laughter. Then a body dragged across the floor. One of his team. He gritted his teeth. The moment passed. The footsteps faded. They moved again. Then, finally they reached it. The holding bay. He peered through the grate. 4 bodies, shackled, slumped. 2 were breathing. He wanted to weep, but there was no time. He turned to Ton. Can you make noise far from here? A distraction. The boy nodded. You'll get them out. I swear it. Moments later, a pipe clattered in the distance. Yells followed. The commando slipped through the grate like a ghost. He moved fast. 1 guard, neck broken silently, the others unaware. He rushed to the survivors. Lena Bear lay, conscious. Corporal Reese, bleeding but awake. We're going home, he whispered. Lena smiled faintly. I thought you were dead. Not yet, he snapped. Their cuffs, dragged them up. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire echoes, boots pounding metal. Tyon had bought them seconds. That's all they had. He hoisted Lena on his back. Reese staggered beside him. They ran. Bullets rained. 1 hit. Reese in the shoulder. He screamed but kept moving. Tyon appeared at the junction, waving frantically. This way. They followed him into the ventilation chute. Crawled through blood. Soot. Darkness. Behind them screams, then silence. Then daylight. They burst into the jungle. Sunlight. Air. Smoke still rose from the compound, but they were out. Safe. Not yet, but alive. For now. And as they collapsed among the trees, lungs heaving, the commando finally let himself cry again. Not from pain, but from knowing that even in the darkest hole, light still found a way. And sometimes, it came in the form of a boy with a gun too big for his hands, and a heart too brave for this world. The jungle was no longer just a place. They were in it now, breathing it, bleeding in it, becoming part of its madness. And for Ares, the illusion that he was simply going through training had shattered long ago. This wasn't a test anymore. This was survival. Raw, brutal, unforgiving. The rain had become their only constant. It fell in thick sheets, mixing with sweat and grime, soaking their uniforms until they clung like second skins. The river they had crossed hours ago had left a foul stink on their boots. Leeches clung to their calves like dark curses, and no matter how many they picked off, more came crawling from the muddy underbrush. His team was down to 4 now. Out of the original 10 who had started this extended recon, 6 had been pulled, some with twisted ankles, others with infections, one with a nervous breakdown so severe he had to be sedated and airlifted out. That left Ares, Shamshir, Niazi, and Kalimna a stubborn few who refused to quit. But something had changed since yesterday. Shamshir wasn't talking. He just walked now, eyes scanning trees like he expected them to whisper secrets. Kalim had started muttering prayers under his breath. Niazi, the joker of the group, hadn't cracked a single line in 36 hours. And Ares, he was starting to see things that couldn't be real. He wasn't sure if it was sleep deprivation or dehydration. But once, when they passed a clearing, he thought he saw a boy standing beside a tree, wearing the same academy uniform, saluting him. The boy had no face. Ares shook his head violently and kept moving. Hallucinations. That's all. The instructors had warned them about this. When your body breaks, your mind is next. That's where most of you will fail, not in your legs, but in your head. But he didn't expect it to feel like this. They reached the base of a ridge that had to be climbed. Mud caked every stone. The rain made it a slide more than a climb. Shamshar went first, setting pitons into the rock with trembling fingers. Ares followed, each movement a war against his own cramping muscles. Halfway up, Niazi slipped. It wasn't a dramatic fall. Just one bad grip, one slick patch of moss sand. He was gone. A scream, a crunch. Silence. No one said anything. Ares wanted to scream. He wanted to cry. But all he could do was climb. Because the moment he looked down, the moment he let grief in, he knew he'd fall too. Asterisk. By the time they reached the top, night had swallowed the jungle whole. They didn't even try to set up camp, just collapsed into the dirt, packs still on their backs. Shamshir lit a tiny fire under a rock shelf, shielding the flame from wind. They chewed protein bars in silence. No one mentioned Niazi, no one dared. Then Kalim broke. I can't, he whispered, rocking slowly. I can't do this anymore. This is not training. This is not what I signed up for. You signed up to be a soldier, Shamshir said, voice hoarse. This is war. But it's not, Kaleem spat. Where's the enemy? He had dragged Farouk's body through the water for what felt like hours. Broken, twisted, unmoving, yet somehow, Zion refused to let him go. Each stroke of his leg pushed against the weight of memory, the boy who had once shared food with him under a broken fan, the friend who always hummed old Bollywood songs after a firefight, the brother who'd once promised, if we ever go down, we go down together. But only one came up. Zain broke the surface with a gasp. But the victory of air tasted hollow. Cheers. No medals, just wind, ripples, and silence. He pulled himself onto the rocky bank. The rescue chopper thumped in the distance, growing louder, closer, but he didn't wave, didn't scream for help. He just lay back on the jagged stones, staring at the sky that had turned orange with sunset. His uniform clung to him like a skin he no longer wanted. Then the tears came. He didn't fight them, not this time. They ran, warm against his cold cheeks, mixing with lake water and blood. He had dreamt of being a commando since he was 10, running through alleyways with a toy gun, saluting his father's old photograph. Now here he was, a man who had killed, bled, survived, and cried like a child in the arms of nature. It wasn't weakness, it was truth. The chopper landed. Medics ran, someone yelled his name, but he didn't move, just closed his eyes and whispered to the sky, I'm sorry, bye. I brought you home, just like I promised. Farouk's body was lifted with ceremony, draped, honored, but Zion couldn't feel pride, only emptiness. Because the world would see, the medals, the promotion, the salutes, but not the nightmares, not the sound of a best friend choking on his last breath while whispering, keep going, don't let them win. 1 year later, Zion stood in front of a small group of young recruits. His uniform was crisp, the scars on his face had faded, but the weight in his voice never left. You want to be commandos? He asked. They nodded, some grinning. He walked slowly before them, holding a dog tag in his palm. This isn't a movie. This isn't glory. This ... He held up the tag, ... is a man I loved like a brother. He died 2 meters from the extraction point because I made a decision under fire. Right or wrong doesn't matter. What matters is you will carry the ones you lose. Forever. Silence fell on the room. You want to be a commando, he repeated. Then be ready to cry in the water. Alone. Because this job the Soth is paid with pain. And yet, one by one, the recruits stood taller. Not out of pride but out of reverence. Because they understood, the badge was not just honor, it was grief forged into steel. As the session ended, Zion stepped outside. The sun touched his face, and he thought of Farouk. I didn't break, he whispered, but I did change. In the distance, water shimmered once again, and this time, he didn't cry. He just stood quietly, and saluted.